Hi, this is David with David's Tutorials. I'm sure you already know that most airliners carry flight recorders. In today's video, I'd like to go into a little bit of detail about exactly what these flight recorders are, what they do, why they have made air travel one of the safest modes of transportation in the world, and my idea for making them even better. For many years now, decades, airliners have been required to carry flight recorders. They carry two different kinds of flight recorders. They carry an FDR, a flight data recorder, and they carry also a CVR, a cockpit voice recorder. These two recorders record a lot of the things that go on in an airplane, and let's look at each one of these. A flight data recorder, an FDR, in today's airplane, it records more than 200 flight parameters of whatever the airplane is doing. It records things like airspeed and throttle position and altitude and bank angle and yaw and pitch and roll angle and the control inputs. It records 200 parameters, and it records them for about 2 hours in a rolling recording. Now, a rolling recording means that whenever the recording media gets filled up, the oldest recording is overwritten by the newer thing, so they always have the latest 2 hours of flight data in that recorder. That's a flight data recorder. Now, a CVR, or a cockpit voice recorder, records through a number of microphones throughout the cockpit of the aircraft. It not only records everything that the crew members say in the cockpit and any of their vocal emanations, such as coughing or clearing their throat, anything like that. It also records aircraft sounds such as alerts, beeps, buzzers, bleeps, voice generations such as pull up, pull up. Those sort of things are recorded, but in addition to that, it also records the other noises. For example, it will record the rush of the wind outside, and by running that through a computer, they can tell the airspeed of the aircraft. If you have a 2-engine aircraft and one engine quits, you'll be able to hear that on the cockpit voice recorder. So these are the two recorders that they carry in airplanes and airliners today. Military aircraft, up until recently, were not required to carry any of these, but I've heard that they've started carrying at least the flight data recorders, and I don't know about much because I have been out of flying airplanes for many years now. But as a former pilot and as a safety officer in the Air Force, I am very interested in the investigations of air crashes. The Smithsonian Channel has a series called Air Disasters that I find absolutely fascinating. And you would think, why would a pilot focus on air crashes? Doesn't that seem very morbid? Well, no, it doesn't, because the Air Disasters series on Smithsonian Channel not only focuses on what happens, and they have excellent animations in this, but they also focus on the investigations. At this point in the video, I tried to show you a preview of the Air Disasters introduction and a few seconds of one of their videos just to show you how good they are. Sadly, automated copyright checking prevented this. And the investigations are the reason that air travel is one of the safest modes of transportation in the world. The investigators, primary thing they look for are the flight recorders, the FDR and the CVR, and they very rarely give up an investigation without getting a very confident determination of what it was that caused the crash, and then they make recommendations that are pretty much binding on airlines, on airplane manufacturers, on the FAA or any other governing aircraft agency from other countries, that the procedures, the materials change so that this kind of crash will never happen again. And that's why it is safe, because, you know, crash happens for one reason and they find out what that reason is and they fix that reason. The chances are very slim that a crash will happen for that same reason again. Now, airplane crashes are exceedingly rare today. Airplane crashes where the investigators cannot access, get to, retrieve the flight recorders are even more rare, but it does happen. In watching this Smithsonian series Air Disasters, I have seen several instances where the investigators were unable to retrieve the flight recorders. And that got me to thinking. Now, I'm one of these kind of people, a typical Martian, always looking for a solution to some sort of situation. But I had this idea, and I want to share it with you right now. My idea is to have a set of secondary flight recorders. These secondary flight recorders would be contained in an ejectable pod in the rear of the aircraft. Now, they could hold at least as much information as the primary recorders, because the primary recorders, will now hold up to about 2 hours of information. But with the most modern technology, you can get a solid state drive that has 2 terabytes and even 4 terabytes for about $600. That's no bigger than about a stick of gum. And this will hold a huge amount of data, and it will hold everything that goes to the primary flight recorders. Now, since all the data is already being fed to these primary flight recorders, it would be a very simple engineering matter to branch off that feed and also feed it to the secondary flight recorders. Now, one of the reasons that flight recorders have not been able to be retrieved is there's a huge fire when the airplane crashes, like soon after takeoff when it's full of fuel and the fire just totally consumes it, and it basically melts the flight recorders such that you just can't retrieve the data. Other instances have been when they went in a jungle and the airplane broke apart in flight and everything scattered over 5-6 miles of trail, making about 100 square mile of jungle area to search. And sometimes they have been unable to retrieve the flight recorders from that. Or the airplane crashes in the middle of the ocean and it's somewhere down 8,000 feet deep and they've been unable to retrieve the flight data recorders. So my suggestion is that you take these secondary flight recorders, you first encase them in ceramic foam, the same kind of foam that the space shuttle tiles are made out of. This is made to resist huge amounts of heat from the reentry of the space shuttle into the atmosphere. You encase them in this sort of ceramic foam. Then you take the ceramic foam and you put an air bladder around it. This air bladder would be made out of the same material as the escape slides from the emergency exits of an airplane. They are very, very tough, and they are fire resistant, and they resist an awful lot of impact and puncture damage. They're very hard to puncture. And as soon as the pod is ejected from the aircraft, about a half a second after it gets away from the aircraft, a computer will fire a CO2 cartridge or whatever it is, and it will inflate that bladder. And this bladder would blow up to whatever size would be necessary. The first thing it would do, it would slow the descent of the pod. The second thing it would do, it would cushion the landing of the pod. The third thing it would do is it would float on top of the water. Now, inside this pod, there would also be a dedicated computer. It could be something as small as a Raspberry Pi, which is a computer that would basically equal the size of one of these solid-state drives that I was telling you about before, but can be very easily programmed, or even a microchip, such as being produced by Apple right now, would be able to be programmed to sense when a crash is imminent. Now, I'm going to leave it up to the engineers to determine what that sense is, but it just makes all kind of sense to me that since all of the flight data parameters are being fed into the secondary recorders, that this computer would be able to sense, for example, if you're descending at 6,000 feet per minute, if you're at 25,000 feet altitude, that's no big deal. But if you're descending at 6,000 feet a minute and you're at 500 feet altitude, that's a totally different story. And the computer would say, we're about to crash, let's eject the pod. And it would eject the pod usually 2 to 4 seconds before the airplane impacts the ground. Now, the ejection would be of such force that it would let the pod get far enough away from the aircraft that it would be away from any resulting fireball or fire consumption that would ordinarily melt the primary flight recorders. If the aircraft crashed into the jungle, the pod will also have a triple alert system. The first alert would be strobe lights. There would be a strobe light right on the pod itself, the bladder on the outside. The second One would be a strobe light on top of an antenna, and this is a second type of alert, which would be a visual alert. There would be a antenna that sticks up 6, 10, 12 feet in the air that would have a strobe light on the top of it, and it would also have a Nomex streamer in a fluorescent color. Now, Nomex is a fire-resistant cloth material. It would have the visible alert. It would also have an audio alert that would have, for several hours after the crash, a very loud, and they can do this with microcircuitry now, alert that goes boo, 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 which is the universal emergency aircraft signal. Whenever you hear this over the radio waves, you know there's been an aircraft emergency. And if they do this by audio, if they're flying drones over a jungle just to locate this, they would not only be able to see the strobe light, and if that was way down in the deep forest of the jungle, they ought to be able to hear the audio alert through the drone. And the third alert would be an RF or radio frequency alert, which would broadcast over the emergency channel that same audio alert that I said indicates an aircraft emergency, and they should also broadcast the GPS coordinates. The GPS coordinates are part of the data feed that goes into the flight data recorder. So the place where it ejected, those coordinates would be in the secondary flight recorders and would be able to be broadcast over the radio frequency alert. Now, this would be a survivable set of secondary flight recorders. And you might think, wow, that's going to be really expensive to do. However, when you consider that a new airliner costs well over $100 million, and some of them are $300 million, $500 million for these giant airliners, the cost to build one of these secondary flight recorder ejection pods would be virtually negligible. And if it saved one aircraft crash, it would pay for the entire fleet to have had these things installed. That's about all I've got on secondary flight recorders. I think it's a great idea. I do not have the wherewithal to go out and develop this and manufacture it and try to sell it and make a whole bunch of money on it. I don't care about making a whole bunch of money off of it. All I care about is helping make air travel safer for everybody. And to that end, I hereby put this idea, which is my idea because I've never heard it before, into the public domain. Anybody out there who wants to grab this idea and run with it, you cannot patent it because it's my idea and I have just put it in the public domain, but you're welcome to develop it and to present it to the aircraft manufacturers and urge them to include it in their airliners from now on. Present it to the FAA, present it to the National Transportation Safety Board, and urge them to begin requiring this in all airliners. That's all I've got. That's my idea for secondary flight recorders to be included in all airliners from now into the future to make air travel for everybody safer than ever. If you like this video, please give me that thumbs up. That will let me and the YouTube robots know that you thought it was a video worth sharing with many other people, and please share this video. If you know anybody in the FAA, if you know anybody in the National Transportation Safety Board, if you know anybody at an aircraft manufacturer, send them this video. Let them know that this new concept is out there, it's available, it's something that will make everybody safer and happier. Give me a comment in the comment section down below. I would really appreciate that. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody who has subscribed to this channel. And if you're not a subscriber, go ahead right now, click that subscribe button and then the bell icon, and YouTube will let you know via email when I post another video right here on the David's Tutorials channel and my new vlog focus. Take care, everybody. Have yourselves an absolutely wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video.